1984 as an engineering officer. He then proceeded to become an intelligence officer and spent 27 years in the Central Intelligence Agency, retiring with the position of Deputy Chief of Logistics. He has achieved numerous awards, such as the Distinguished Intelligence Medal, Air Assault Badge, and being inducted into the OCS Hall of Fame in 2020 for his years of dedicated service. Following his distinguished career of government service, he joined the private sector, where he holds the current position of Vice President of Gemini Enterprise. Mr. Pasqualini, would you join me on the stage, please?
Good afternoon. What a magnificent building we're in, isn't it? And a beautiful day, even though it's raining. If it didn't rain, we would not be able to appreciate the beautiful sunny day. So it's a beautiful day in the beautiful city of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, my favorite city in the entire world, I'm sure yours, and home of Pittsburgh Steelers, Pirates, and Penguins. I'm very honored to be here today. I'm happy that Colonel Straub invited me to come to talk to you, our new lieutenants. I'll be maybe not the first, and I know it won't be the last, but congratulations, lieutenants. We have 8 new lieutenants joining us today. I would like to introduce, I know you're going to get introduced again, but I'd like to personally recognize you with your new rank if I could. So could I have Lieutenant Hunter Bailey please stand? Please stay standing with the rest of your class. Lieutenant Jenna Baltus, and if I butcher the name, I apologize in advance. Lieutenant Kyle Bardafet. Lieutenant Ryan Bennett. Lieutenant Matthew Bobby. Lieutenant Eric Jenny. Lieutenant Joseph Pinnon. Lieutenant Casey Watkins. Big round of applause for our new lieutenant. So what I'd like to do, before we talk about the future, is take a few minutes to talk about our past. When we look at where our nation is today, we must think of how we got here. Our country has been in existence just over 240 years now. If you think about this though, during the entire 240 years of our nation's existence, we've been at peace less than 20 of those years. 95% of the time that we've existed as a nation, our military has been in a state of war or conflict. Freedom is not free. We know this. It has been bought with the blood of our heroes. Let's reflect on a few examples of the past before we look to the future. The first time Americans spilt blood as Americans, not for the king, not for the crown, but as American patriots, was 19 April 1775, the Battle of Lexington and Concord. 90 patriots lay dead on the field in our first conflict as a nation. During the War of 1812, 13-14 September of 1814, the British had taken our nation's capital, Washington, D.C., and burned it. Their next target was the city of Baltimore. Fort McHenry guarded that harbor. Major Armistead manned the fort with 1,000 Americans. 19 British warships blasted the fort for 24 continuous hours, trying to bomb the fort into submission. At daybreak, the British fully expected to see a white flag of surrender flying over Fort McHenry. Instead, what greeted them was a torn and tattered Star-Spangled Banner. Against all odds, the fort refused to surrender. That story of American courage and bravery is represented in our national anthem that we just heard. The attack on Baltimore had failed. 28 Americans gave their lives at Fort McHenry. 1 through 3 July 1863, not far from here in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, during our great Civil War, 7,058 Americans lost their lives on those fields. The numbers were so high because both sides were Americans. 3,155 died fighting for the Union, 3,903 died fighting for the Confederacy. 26 September through 11 November 1918, in the Meuse-Argonne Offensive of World War I, 26,000 Americans gave their lives in defense of freedom in Europe. 7 December 1941, a day that will live in infamy, the Empire of Japan launched an unprovoked and unwarranted attack on our Pacific fleet sitting at harbor in Pearl Harbor. 2,403 Americans died that day. As a result of that, the United States was thrust into World War II. In a single battle between 6 June and 25 August 1944, the Battle of Normandy in World War II, 29,204 Americans gave their lives to liberate Europe from the oppression of Nazi Germany. D-Day, 6 June, is the deadliest single day in American military history. On D-Day alone, 2,811 men hit Omaha and the other beaches of Normandy and gave their lives in defense of freedom for not only Americans, but the world. The United States did not fight to conquer Europe, we fought to liberate Europe. I'd like to tell you a brief story about one of those groups of men. On 11 July 1944, the United States began to break up from the Omaha beaches. We began to push through France and had strong German resistance. At 6 o'clock in the morning, near the town of St. Lo, France, there was a strong German fortification, built 192. The United States tried to take it several times and failed. But on the 11th of July, they made up their mind that they would launch the all-out attack to take the hill and capture St. Lo, which was a strategic crossroads to be able to expand out of the Normandy area and across France and into Germany. 6 Shermans of Alpha Company, 741st Tank Battalion led the assault. The tanks were attacking up the highest and steepest part of Hill 192 over soggy ground. That morning it was overcast and foggy when the attack began. All 6 of the Sherman tanks were immediately destroyed by direct German fire within minutes of crossing the line of departure. One of those tanks took a direct hit from a German rocket. After the initial explosion, several additional explosions followed in the tank. The tank was engulfed in flames and smoke. One member of the tank crew, Private Buchanan, somehow survived and escaped the tank. The Army report stated that the other 4 crew members were killed instantly with the explosions. The men in that tank who died were Staff Sergeant Fair from Pennsylvania, Tech Ford Nixon, Private Perkins, and Corporal Frank Pasqualini. That was my uncle, Frank Pasqualini of Catania. His young son Bobby waited for him at home. He wrote a letter to Bobby shortly before he died. And he said, "Son, I miss you a lot. Be a good soldier for Mommy. When I get home, I'm going to buy you the best puppy dog there is. Love, Dad." He never got to see his son again. He never got to come home. He gave his life in France in the defense of freedom. Every one of these numbers I told you about has a story just like that. These aren't numbers. Every one of them was an American with dreams and hopes and family members. And every one of them gave their lives by paying the ultimate sacrifice in defense of our nation. 27 November through 13 December 1950, at Chosun Reservoir in Korea, 1,029 Americans died. Don't worry, I'm not going to go through every battle the United States has fought. We'd be here for a long time. 30 January 1968, Tet Offensive in Vietnam, 1,145 died. More recently, in our history, 11 September of 2001, 2,977 lives were lost here in the United States. Not all were soldiers. Some were children in a daycare center down at the Pentagon. Some were people working at the World Trade Center in New York. Some were people visiting family on an airplane flying over the fields of Pennsylvania. Since that time, our nation has been at war for 20 years in a global war on terror to defeat the evils of terrorism. Our military personnel make extreme sacrifices. We must not only remember those who died, but remember those who were wounded, those who were missing in action, those who survived under harsh conditions. All military personnel who serve away from family and friends and miss so many events while they're serving their country away from home. Our military serves to protect our way of life. Our military are citizen soldiers. But why do these citizens serve? Why do they join the military? I think for many reasons, but I think the number one is patriotism. Patriotism with the love and vigorous support for one's country. What does that mean? Well, each and every person that puts on the uniform of our nation, including our 8 new lieutenants, they're going to take an oath. The oath they take is to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic. That is the oath that every person who puts on that uniform takes. Not to a king, not to a president, not to a dictator, to the Constitution. Our Constitution defines our nation. Our Constitution was written to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote general welfare, secure the blessings of liberty for ourselves and our posterity, not only today's generation, but future generations of America. For over 240 years, our great national experiment of government of the people, by the people, for the people has endured. Our country is not perfect. We've made mistakes throughout our history. That's why our Constitution says it's trying to form a more perfect union. We must learn from our mistakes, learn from our history, and always strive to be better. That's what makes America great. We may have made mistakes, but we must always remember that the foundational principles of our nation are flawless. They always have been, and they always will be. Those principles are equality, individual rights, liberty, democracy, opportunity. That's what America is. We don't fight to conquer. We fight to liberate. We fight for freedom. We fight for liberty. We fight for the oppressed. That's what America is. That's what our military does. President Reagan said it best. America is a shining city upon a hill whose beacon light guides freedom-loving people everywhere, blessed by God and teeming with all kinds of people living together. All kinds of people. The diversity, the differences is what makes us a great nation. Blacks and whites, Christians and Muslims, gay and straight, even Democrats and Republicans. We're all Americans. Our diversity is what makes us a great nation. Also, President Kennedy said, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. Today, we have an all-volunteer military, yet less than 1% of our population serves in uniform. Our recruiting numbers fall short. I would encourage our youth to serve. These 8 have taken that challenge. They've accepted it. They're going to enter into the United States military as lieutenants in the United States Air Force. This is our youth. We have the most powerful military the world has ever known. Our military is global. We're on all corners of the earth. We fight over there so that we don't have to fight here in our homeland. Think about it. It's been over 200 years since our nation has been invaded by a foreign military. Not many countries can say that. Our flag does not fly because the wind moves it. It flies with the last breath of every soldier who died protecting it. Do we happen to have any Korean or Vietnam veterans with us today? If so, if they would please stand up. Big round of applause, please. I'd like to officially welcome you home on behalf of the United States. I doubt it, but I'm going to ask. Do we have any World War II veterans here with us today? It was not surprising. Over 16 million Americans served in World War II. 416,000 did not come home. They gave their lives when killed in action. But time is catching up with our greatest generation. There's only a few 100,000 left in the entire country. The youngest of them is now well into their 90s. General Patton, when he talked about the greatest generation, he said, "It is foolish and wrong to mourn these men who died in defense of our nation. Rather, we should thank God that such men lived. This is indeed the greatest generation." Now I'd like to take a minute and look to the future. You 8, and the rest of you, you're our future. This is what we talk about our past, we must remember it. This is the foundation our nation was built on. I want you to understand the history, understand the sacrifices, understand all of the men and women who died in defense of our nation. I'd like to pass on a few words of advice to you. First of all, we have services in our military. It's natural that we have good, clean ribbing and fun. Don't be surprised when the Army and the Marines make fun of the Air Force for having it easy. Don't be surprised when we talk about your better mess halls and your better chow and everything else, and you should say, "That's right, because we're better." That should be your response. You will get that, but trust me, when it comes to a time of war, when it comes to our enemies, all of the services are unified. We all fight together, we all work together for the common goal of national defense. Have a plan. You new lieutenants, you have great responsibility that comes with your commission. Have a plan, but don't write it in stone. No plan is going to stand when it comes to actually implementing. Make sure you have other options, contingencies. Always look to improvise, adapt, and overcome. You will come up with obstacles. You must find a way. Be proactive. Don't wait to be told what to do. When you get to your unit, you know what needs to be done. Do it, and do it well. Communicate. Communicate up, down, sideways, across, between your men, between supervisors, between the other services. Miscommunication leads to most problems. I firmly believe that. Most important, I would say, know your role as an officer in the United States military. I've told you about the history because I want you to understand where our military came from. You're now part of that institution. This isn't Walmart. You're joining a profession, a military profession, serving the greatest nation the world has ever known. Take your role seriously. Be a role model. Do the right thing even when those aren't watching. Nobody's watching. You know what needs to be done. You know what's right. High moral character. As an officer, your commission, it's your responsibility. You are our youth, but yet there are youth assigned to you. The mothers and fathers of America gives you these airmen. You're responsible for their health and welfare and their well-being. Take it seriously. You're their leader. You're their mentor. You're their role model. One such airman is my grandson, Pasqualini. He's now an airman signed out to Denver. One of you may be his boss. It's important that you understand the seriousness of your role. Know your NCOs. Your NCOs are truly the backbone of the military. It's a partnership, the officers and the NCOs working together to accomplish the mission of the United States military. You cannot do it without the NCOs. You cannot do it without the enlisted men. You can't do it without the other services. This is indeed a unified military. I told you about World War II, and I wanted to focus on it. We call them the greatest generation for good reason. I challenge you to become the next greatest generation our country has ever known. You can do it. I have no doubt our youth has the talent and the potential and the capability. It's a big shoes to fill. That generation lived through the Depression. They fought a world war. They made many, many sacrifices. Picture hitting Omaha Beach. Picture the loss of life all around you, and yet they continued. It's a huge task I'm asking you, but our nation needs it. Our nation is counting on you. Be the next greatest generation. I want you to do great things, and I want you to do nothing less. I congratulate you as you start your career in the United States military. May God bless you, and may God continue to bless the United States of America.